The grand ballroom of Sinclair Manor glittered beneath the weight of 1,000 chandeliers, casting light across polished marble floors and whispered secrets. The scent of roses and expensive perfume thickened the air, but even they could not mask the tension humming beneath the celebration. Evan Hartley adjusted the borrowed tuxedo that clung a little too tightly to his frame. Beside him, Aurora Sinclair stood radiant in a flowing silver gown, her beauty shining brighter than the crystal lights above. Evan's heart thudded painfully with hope. Tonight was supposed to be the beginning of everything he had ever dreamed of. Margot Sinclair, the matriarch of the family, lifted her champagne flute and tapped it against her ring. The sharp sound silenced the room like a whip crack. "Ladies and gentlemen," Margot announced, her voice smooth as velvet and twice as deadly, "we gather here to celebrate, yet also to reflect on the values we must uphold." Evan's stomach twisted. He forced a smile, clinging to Aurora's hand, but he felt her fingers tense. Margot's smile widened, a slow carving of cruelty. "We, the Sinclair family, hold honor above all. Regrettably, certain associations cannot be allowed to tarnish our legacy." A ripple of discomfort passed through the crowd. Evan's mind raced. What was she doing? Aurora's hand slipped from his. Her eyes shimmered with tears she refused to shed. "I'm sorry, Evan," she whispered. Her voice cracked like thin ice. "I can't go against them. I can't lose everything." Before he could respond, the engagement ring, the fragile promise of a future, was pressed into his palm. The cold metal burned against his skin. Aurora turned away, swallowed by the faceless crowd that had once smiled at him. Evan stood frozen, the grand ballroom now a cavern of broken dreams. Above him, the chandeliers glittered like stars mocking his foolish hope. The illusion of forever crumbled in silence. The morning after the gala was painted in dull gray light. Evan sat slumped on the steps of Sinclair Manor, the heavy oak doors firmly shut behind him. A crumpled invitation lay forgotten by his side, its golden lettering now a cruel joke. His phone buzzed, breaking the cold silence. It was a message from his sister, Clara. "Come home. They are not worth it." But Evan could not move. His mind replayed every moment of betrayal, every brittle smile and false promise. The Sinclairs had not just ended his engagement, they had humiliated him in front of an empire. Inside the mansion, the family gathered around the grand dining table. Margot surveyed her children like a queen inspecting her court. Beside her sat Lawrence Sinclair, her eldest son, eyes cold and calculating. Across from him, Ava Sinclair, the youngest, toyed with her diamond bracelet, bored by the whole affair. Aurora was absent. She had locked herself in her room, refusing breakfast, refusing to face the consequences. "You were sloppy," Lawrence said, slicing into his steak with a casual cruelty. "It was meant to be cleaner." Margot sipped her tea, unbothered. "It served its purpose. He knows his place now." "Still," Ava chimed in with a smirk, "he might not stay quiet. Love makes men foolish." Margot's smile did not falter. "If he speaks, we will simply ensure no one listens." Outside, Evan finally rose. His heart was cracked but not broken. Betrayal had a way of forging steel where there had been only hope. As he walked away from Sinclair Manor, the gray sky split open with the first drops of rain. Each step he took was heavy, but certain. Evan Hartley would not disappear quietly. In the reflection of a puddle, the grand manor twisted and warped, its perfect image fractured by ripples. Beneath the glassy surface, shadows danced. And Evan vowed, with every fiber of his being, that he would uncover every one of them. No matter the cost. Weeks drifted by like heavy mist, yet Evan Hartley remained relentless. Each day he spent tracing whispers across London's underbelly. A city that, behind its polished stone and glass, teemed with secrets. In a smoky cafe hidden between derelict alleys, Evan met an informant. A gaunt man with ink-stained fingers handed him a black envelope. No name, no seal. Only a single word written in blood-red ink, Elysium. "Elysium," Evan repeated under his breath. The man leaned closer, breath sour with cheap whiskey. "You want dirt on the Sinclairs? Elysium is where they bury their sins." That night, Evan stood before a nondescript door tucked between two abandoned warehouses. A narrow brass plaque bore the name, Elysium, in faded letters. No guards, no cameras, just an oppressive stillness that made the skin prickle. Inside, The air was thick with perfume, cigar smoke, and money. Crystal chandeliers threw distorted light across velvet drapes. Men and women wore masks of silver and black, their laughter sharp and brittle. A masked woman approached Evan, her gown whispering against the marble floor. She offered a hand gloved in lace. "First time?" she asked, voice smooth as silk. He nodded. "Be careful," she whispered, leaning close enough for Evan to smell the jasmine on her skin. "Truth has a price here. One you may not afford." Ignoring the warning, Evan moved deeper into the labyrinth of decadence. He found a crimson ledger locked behind glass. And in it, names, dates, amounts, blood money, debts, betrayals. The Sinclairs were among the most frequent entries, their fingerprints on every ugly transaction. A cold rage settled in Evan's gut. Margot Sinclair had built her empire not on steel or stone, but on broken people and buried lies. As he snapped a photo of the ledger with his hidden phone, the room shifted. Conversations dulled. Heads turned. Someone had noticed him. The hunt had begun. The hunt had only just begun, but Evan Hartley knew he was no longer the hunter. Somewhere, amidst the crowded labyrinth of the Elysium, the real game was about to unfold. He darted through the crowds, his heart thundering in his chest. Each step echoed in the vast space, each mask and costume a symbol of power and deception. But among the masks, there was one that caught his eye. A man in a tailored black suit, his face hidden behind a simple silver mask, his movements calculated, like a predator in waiting. Evan's instincts screamed, but he couldn't turn back. This was no longer just about Margot Sinclair. It was about the men and women who kept her empire alive, the ones who were so careful with their lies that even the most trained eyes could be fooled. He followed the man, staying hidden in the shadows, until they both reached the farthest corner of Elysium, where a small chamber lay behind a red velvet curtain. The man paused at the entrance, as if sensing Evan's presence, before disappearing inside. Evan hesitated for a moment. But only for a moment. This was his chance to confront the truth, to finally unearth the demons buried within Sinclair's web. With a deep breath, Evan stepped through the curtain. Inside, the air was thick, almost suffocating. The room was dimly lit, with shadows dancing across the walls. At the center of the room, a man sat at a grand oak desk, his fingers steepled together in front of him. "Evan Hartley," the man said without turning around, his voice calm and measured. "You've been chasing ghosts. But tonight, you found something far worse." The figure slowly turned in his chair, revealing a face Evan had never expected to see, a face he knew far too well. It was William Sinclair, Margot's estranged brother. "You've been playing right into my hands," William continued, his lips curling into a smile. "Did you honestly think Margot was the only one with blood on their hands?" Evan stood frozen, a chill running through his spine. William Sinclair was the one pulling the strings all along. The room felt like it was closing in on Evan, each second stretching into eternity as he tried to make sense of what William Sinclair had just revealed. The truth had been twisted beyond recognition, and the man standing before him was the true mastermind behind the chaos that had consumed his life. "I know what you're thinking," William said, his smile widening as he leaned back in his chair. "You're wondering how I could be behind all this. How could I have manipulated my own sister into becoming a weapon of destruction?" Evan's gaze never left him. "You've destroyed everything. You're no better than her." William chuckled darkly, the sound filling the empty space between them. "Destroyed? No. Evan. I've built something. What Margot did, what she's been doing, is nothing more than the foundation for what's to come. And you've been a pawn all along, just like everyone else." Evan's fists clenched. The anger that had been boiling beneath the surface for so long was now threatening to consume him. But something inside him held him back, the cold realization that if he acted too rashly, he'd lose everything. Why? Why go through all of this? Why use her? Why me? William leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous intensity. "Because, Evan, the world doesn't operate on ideals. It operates on power, control. And you've been trying to fight that power with nothing but naive ideals. Margot, like me, understands that. She knows what it takes to make this world bend to your will. And now, I'm going to show you what true power looks like." Evan's heart raced. He wanted to strike out, to finally take control of the situation, but he knew better than to act impulsively. He needed answers, and William Sinclair had them. The question was, could he survive long enough to uncover the full extent of the dark empire that had been built around him? William stood up, his posture imposing as he moved toward the desk, opening a hidden drawer. He pulled out a folder thick with papers and placed it on the table before Evan. "This," William said, "is everything. The true story. The Sinclair legacy." Evan didn't reach for the folder immediately. He studied William's face, searching for any sign of weakness. But there was nothing. William Sinclair was untouchable, an enigma wrapped in a mask of calculated charm and ruthlessness. "You think you can win this, don't you?" William asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You think you can save her, save yourself. But in the end, Evan, there's only one thing that matters. The game is rigged. And you're already too deep to escape." The folder remained on the desk, its contents waiting to be uncovered. But as Evan reached for it, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything he thought he knew was about to be turned upside down. The silence in the room was deafening as Evan flipped open the folder, his hands trembling ever so slightly as he took in the contents. Each page, each document, felt like a key unlocking a dark labyrinth he could never have imagined. The images, the reports, the names, all of them tied together in a web of deceit and manipulation. William stood at a distance, watching with cold amusement as Evan absorbed the magnitude of what he was holding. "Do you see now?" William's voice was almost a whisper, yet it filled the room with a chilling finality. "Do you understand the truth?" Evan's eyes moved over the pages, unable to process it all at once. There were names, prominent individuals who had been part of the Sinclair Empire's rise, some of them in positions of power within the government, others in major corporations, all with their hands stained in various degrees of corruption and violence. But the most startling revelation was the connection to Margot. "She was never meant to be just a weapon," William continued, his voice growing more confident. "She was the perfect pawn, the key to controlling everything. She did everything you saw because I told her to. Every step she took, every decision, it was all part of my plan. And now you are part of it too." Evan slammed the folder shut, his breath quickening as the weight of the truth settled on his shoulders. The betrayal, the manipulation, it was all part of a game that he had been unknowingly playing from the start. Margot, the woman he had fought for, the woman he had trusted, was nothing more than a piece on a chessboard, and so was he. "You think you can control her?" Evan spat, his voice raw with anger. "You think you can control me?" William's smile widened, the smugness evident in his every word. "Control? No, Evan. It's not about control. It's about power. And you have to understand. People like us, we don't just play the game. We make the rules. We bend the world to our will, not the other way around." The weight of his words settled on Evan's chest, each syllable a harsh reminder of how deep he was in. He had never been in control, not truly. He had been a puppet, dancing to the tune of a master he couldn't even see. "But there's one thing you don't understand," Evan said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "I don't need to play by your rules. I'm done being a pawn. If I'm going to go down, I'm going to take you with me." William laughed, a dark, low sound that made Evan's blood boil. "You think you can defeat me? After everything you've learned? You're out of your depth, Evan. You can't stop what's already in motion." Evan stepped forward, his determination hardening into something fierce. "Maybe not alone. But I'm not alone anymore." A flicker of confusion crossed William's face for the briefest moment, but it was enough. Evan had seen it. He knew now that there was a crack in William's carefully constructed facade. And that crack, that moment of doubt, would be his opening. Without another word, Evan turned and walked out of the room, the folder still clutched in his hand. He had a new mission now. No longer to save Margot, but to destroy the empire that had ensnared them both. Evan had made his decision. As he stepped out into the night air, the weight of his choice settled heavily on his shoulders. He had once believed he could outsmart William, that he could beat the Sinclair Empire at its own game. But the truth, the full extent of the manipulation and control, was far beyond anything he had anticipated. His mind raced as he walked through the deserted streets, the darkness offering no comfort. There were no clear paths forward, no easy solutions. The game had changed, and Evan was no longer sure of the rules. He needed allies, people who weren't already caught in William's web of lies. But trust had become a fragile thing, broken beyond repair by the revelations of the past few days. The only person he could still turn to, the only one left who might still stand with him, was Margot. But the question burned in his mind. Could she be trusted? He'd seen the way she'd been manipulated, the way William had twisted her into a weapon, a tool to be used and discarded. But Evan also knew that Margot had a strength inside her, a fire that had once burned for something more than just survival. If he could reach that part of her, if he could break through the walls William had built around her, maybe, just maybe, they could destroy the Empire together. As Evan reached his apartment, he stopped at the door. His hand hovered over the handle, but hesitation gripped him. The past few days had been a blur of betrayal and secrets, but this moment was different. He knew that if he stepped inside, he was committing to a path he couldn't turn back from. Inside, he knew he would have to make contact with people who could help him, those who still had the power to bring down the Sinclair Empire. But even as he considered it, he wondered how much he could trust them. After everything he'd seen, after the way the Sinclair name had corrupted everyone it touched, was there anyone left who wasn't part of the system? He closed his eyes, the weight of the decision almost suffocating. He needed information, and more than anything, he needed to act quickly. The longer he waited, the more time William had to solidify his control, to tighten the noose around Margot and everyone else involved. The sound of a car door slamming outside jolted him from his thoughts. He stepped to the window, peering through the blinds. A sleek black car was parked across the street, its headlights flicking off as a shadowy figure stepped out and made their way towards his building. Evan's heart pounded. Could it be Margot? Or was it someone else? Someone sent by William to keep an eye on him? He couldn't afford to take chances anymore. He grabbed his coat, checked that the gun he had hidden in the back of his drawer was still there, and made his way to the door. There would be no turning back now. The game had begun, and Evan knew one thing for certain. It was no longer about saving anyone. It was about taking everything down. And that meant playing by the rules of those who controlled the game, or bending them completely. Evan's eyes narrowed as he watched the figure approach his building. The shadowy figure was tall, moving with purpose. He could feel his pulse quicken as he waited for them to draw closer, unsure whether they were friend or foe. The silence of the night hung thick in the air, adding to the tension. Whoever it was, they weren't here by accident. Evan could sense that much. He stepped back from the window, his mind working quickly. He needed to act, but not recklessly. He couldn't afford to make another mistake, not when everything was on the line. The Sinclair name had already entangled too many lives, and the consequences of a wrong move could be devastating. His thoughts drifted back to Margot. The last time they had spoken, there had been a glimmer of hope in her eyes. He had seen her in the midst of her struggle, torn between loyalty and survival. But how much of that hope was left? William had played his cards well, and it wasn't clear if Margot still had the will to fight. Evan took a deep breath. The path ahead wasn't clear, but he had no choice but to move forward. The game had taken a dark turn, and he could no longer stand on the sidelines. As the figure reached the entrance of the building, Evan's instincts kicked in. He knew the person wasn't here for a casual visit. The cold, purposeful stride was unmistakable. Whoever they were, they had a mission. He moved quickly, grabbing his phone and dialing the one number he could still trust, Margot's. The line rang, then clicked. He held his breath as it went to voicemail. He left a brief message, his voice low and urgent. Margot, it's Evan. If you can hear this, you need to get out. Nah. I don't know who's coming for me, but they're here. Don't trust anyone. Not even me. The call ended, and Evan's stomach churned. It was a risk, but he had no choice. He couldn't afford to wait any longer. He grabbed his coat, ready to make a move, but before he could open the door, a loud knock echoed through the hallway. Someone was on the other side. Evan's hand froze, hovering over the door handle. His heart raced in his chest. The time for hesitation was over. He was no longer just a player in this game. He was the target. Another knock. This time more forceful. Evan steadied his breath. Whoever it was, they were not here to ask questions. He needed to be ready for whatever came next. With one swift motion, he opened the door, and there, standing in the doorway, was the last person he had expected to see. Margot. Her eyes were wide, her face pale. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, and the urgency in her movements made Evan's heart skip a beat. "They're coming for both of us," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We don't have much time." Margot's eyes darted nervously around the room as she stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind her. Evan could see the fear in her expression, but there was something else there too, a kind of resolve, one that he had never seen in her before. It was as though she had finally made a decision, and nothing could stop her now. "They know," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They know everything." Evan felt a chill run down his spine. He had suspected for some time that they were being watched, but hearing it from Margot made it all the more real. The danger was no longer abstract. It was here and it was very real. "Who knows?" he asked, his voice sharp with urgency. "The syndicate," she replied, the word hanging in the air like a dark omen. "They've been tracking us, Evan. I never meant for this to happen." He didn't know whether to feel angry or betrayed. He had trusted her, but now it seemed like every move he made was being orchestrated by someone else. The Sinclair family had always been a target, but this was different. This wasn't just about power or money. This was personal. "They're coming for you too," Margot continued. "I don't know how they found out, but they have eyes everywhere." Evan ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room. His mind was racing. The pieces were all there, but they didn't fit together. Who in the syndicate had tipped them off? And why? Was this all part of William's plan, or had someone else pulled the strings? "I have to get out of here," Evan muttered, more to himself than to Margot. He could feel the walls closing in around him. "No," Margot said quickly, grabbing his arm. "You can't leave. Not yet. They're already watching every exit. If you go now, they'll catch you. We need to think this through." Her grip on his arm was tight, her eyes pleading with him to understand. "I've already made the arrangements," she added. "We have a safe house. But we can't go until we know who's behind all this. We need to find out who sold us out before we make our next move." Evan looked at her, the weight of her words settling in. His trust in her had always been tentative, but now with the syndicate breathing down their necks, it was all they had left. They were in this together, whether they liked it or not. "Fine," he said, exhaling slowly. "But we don't have much time." Margot nodded, her face hardening with determination. "We'll find out who did this, Evan. And when we do, they'll regret ever crossing us." Evan didn't reply. He didn't need to. The fire in Margot's eyes told him everything he needed to know. They had crossed a line they could never uncross. The game had just gotten far more dangerous, and neither of them was going to walk away from this unscathed. As they prepared to leave, Evan caught one last glance at the building's entrance, his heart heavy with the knowledge that once they stepped out, there would be no going back. Whoever had betrayed them was still out there, and they were closer than ever to discovering the truth. Evan and Margot stood in the shadows of an abandoned warehouse, their breath shallow, hearts pounding. The moon hung high above, casting eerie light across the empty lot. It was a stark contrast to the tension that gripped them. Every step forward felt like they were walking deeper into a trap, but there was no turning back now. They had tracked down the syndicate's hidden base of operations, a place that was supposedly untouchable. The walls of the building loomed like a fortress, but Evan knew this was the moment. This was where everything would come to a head. "We're close," Margot whispered, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "This is it, Evan. We find out who's been pulling the strings, and we end this." Evan nodded, his mind sharp, every instinct on high alert. He wasn't just here for answers. He was here for justice. The weight of everything that had happened pressed heavily on his shoulders. The betrayals, the lies. He couldn't let them win. They approached the door, Evan's hand gripping the cold metal of the handle. He glanced at Margot one last time, her face as resolute as his own. Together they had made it this far. They would finish it, no matter the cost. The door creaked open, and the low hum of conversation reached their ears. It was a meeting, a gathering of the syndicate's top members, but what caught Evan's attention was the unmistakable voice at the center of it all. "William Sinclair," he muttered under his breath. The man who had orchestrated so much of their pain, the one who had set everything in motion, was sitting at the head of the table, as smug and composed as ever. His cold eyes locked onto Evan's for a moment, a smirk creeping onto his lips. "Well, well," William said, his voice dripping with disdain. It seems the prodigal son finally returns. Evan didn't flinch. He stepped into the room, his eyes never leaving his father's. The tension between them crackled in the air. You've been behind all of this, haven't you? Evan's voice was calm, but it carried the weight of years of betrayal. You were the one who sold us out. William raised an eyebrow. Sold you out? Evan, my dear boy, I'm not the one who betrayed you. You've always been too blind to see the bigger picture. Evan took a step forward. I didn't come here for games, William. I came here to end this. To end you. A twisted chuckle escaped William's lips. End me? You're far too late for that. The syndicate is untouchable. Even if you kill me, it won't change a thing. You'll just become another pawn in a game you don't understand. Margot moved beside Evan, her eyes narrowing. Don't listen to him, Evan. He's trying to manipulate you. He's the one who's been pulling the strings from the beginning. Evan turned to her, nodding. He was done listening to William's lies. The moment had come. It was time to take control of his fate. With a sharp motion, Evan lunged at William, grabbing him by the collar, pulling him out of his seat. You don't get to control me anymore, Evan growled, his grip tightening. William's smirk faded, replaced by a look of fear. You think you can kill me and end this? You're wrong. You're just a pawn, Evan. And you always will be. But Evan didn't listen. The years of pain, the lies, the manipulation, all of it came to a head in that one moment. With a swift motion, he threw William to the ground. The syndicate members looked on in shock, unsure of what to do. Margot stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. This ends now. As the syndicate members began to stir, Evan and Margot knew that their battle was far from over. They had toppled the head of the snake, but the body remained. The syndicate was still a powerful force, and their influence ran deep. But for the first time in a long while, Evan felt free. The weight of his family's legacy, the shadow of his father's betrayal, it was all behind him now. This isn't over, William spat from the floor, his voice low and menacing. You've made a mistake. The syndicate won't let you get away with this. Evan turned, walking toward the door with Margot by his side. Let them try, he said. We'll be ready. As they stepped into the night, the weight of the past seemed to lift, if only slightly. There was still work to be done, but Evan knew one thing for certain. His family's legacy would not define him. He would carve his own path, and no one, least of all his father, would stand in his way.